and welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess, and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today, and if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend because, hey, it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Actual Tech Media EcoCast today. Today we are talking about data center versus cloud versus Colo. Why to consider, how to choose, and how to move. I want to start off by saying a big thank you to all of you who are joining us today. On the EcoCast, you will be hearing from experts at Rubrik, TierPoint, Dell, Rackspace, and VMware. As you can see, that is a lineup of real heavy hitters today. Exciting stuff. As for who I am, well, I am Keith Ward. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I am truly pleased to be here with you today. Thanks for coming out. You've already met Jess Steinbach, and our other fantastic moderator, a colleague I've known for a long time, is Scott Becker. We are happy to be with you. So we've got a great EcoCast coming up, but that is not all that you're going to get today. 3 of you will be winning a $300 Amazon gift card today. Remember what Jess said right at the beginning, that you do have to be present for the entire event to win the gift cards. And as she also mentioned, the terms and conditions, all of that boring lawyer stuff is available in the handout section. All right, so with all of that out of the way, why don't we get to the main event? I can't wait to get started, and we are going to hear first from Bill Clayman, who is uber knowledgeable about all of these matters, and he is going to give us a fantastic overview of today's topic. So, Bill is ready to go. You have the floor, sir. Take it away.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And hello, everybody, and welcome to, you know what I think is one of my most favorite conversations: data centers, cloud computing, co-locations. What do you consider? How do you choose? And how do you ultimately move? I am Bill Clayman, board member at Neuro, where we get a chance to do and work on some really cool large language models and GPT architectures for the data center. But I am also the program chair for the AFCOM Data Center World event and contributing editor over at Data Center Knowledge and Data Center Frontier. So I get this question asked a lot. Which one do I choose? Which one do I work with? All right, we've got just a few minutes here together. So sit back. And again, we're going to be covering quite a few different kinds of topics. And, you know, I like an interactive audience. If you have questions, comments, concerns, pop those in. I'm going to try and get to those while we're presenting. And here's, before I go on to the next slide, there's going to be a lot of conversations today about what you should choose, how you should make your considerations. And the most important thing is, take something back. Take a little gold nugget for yourself, maybe a piece of this conversation that will really let you, my goodness, see this entire conversation from a different aspect. So again, just a little bit of a gold nugget. Take something away from you when this is all over, and you know, who knows, maybe you'll be able to make an even better and more informed decision. Now, when we start to take a look at data centers, cloud computing, and co-locations, we have to start with something pretty kind of fundamental: data centers by the numbers. And this is some of the latest research that we've been finding. And by the way, I forgot to say this during the intro slide, you are going to get a sneak peek at the AFCOM State of the Data Center report, some expanded findings. This is from a report that I had a chance to study and author as well in just a little bit. But before we get to that, data centers by the numbers. It's been Oh, wow. It's been a fascinating ride. I mean, in case you can't tell, we are an even more connected society than really ever before. And there's a really good report that just came out from Synergy. There are about 900 hyperscale data centers in the world right now. That's about three times as many as there were 5 to 6 years ago. And despite, for example, some logistical issues caused by the pandemic, 52 of those came online in 2020. And another one, 451 Research, looks at the entire global database of about 8,600 co-locations and wholesale data centers worldwide. And again, that number only continues to grow. So let's kind of look at the landscape of where data centers, and this is including co-locations, private on-site data centers, and hyperscalers as well, cloud computing. Where's it all heading? Where's it ultimately going? So about 5 years ago, almost 60% of data center capacity was in on-premise data centers, enterprise facilities. Looking ahead 5 years, hyperscale operators, and this includes co-locations, will include over half of all capacity, while on-premise will drop to under 30%. Meanwhile, the total capacity of all data centers is going to continue to rise. So if you take a look at this chart right now, we've got about 53% of all hyperscalers here in the United States, but those emerging markets, oh my goodness, across Latin America, Asia, South Asia, across the entire globe where we haven't had this big development, well, it's growing. The amount of connectivity is growing. So the choice between private on-prem, co-location, or cloud becomes even more important and kind of becomes more front and center. Now, if you take a look at that data center capacity trend, you're going to see that our old school legacy, not always well-managed facilities, well, they're going to go by the wayside. And that's not a bad thing. We're still going to have on-premise facilities, but you can see by 2027, it's kind of like an even split between hyperscale, leased, co-location on hyperscale, and of course, enterprise on premise. So let's pause here for a second. We've got a few more minutes to talk about this, and I promise I'll get to the big important slide of which one do you choose and the pros and cons between each of them. But it's kind of important to understand why this growth is happening and really sort of the emerging trends that are impacting our industry. The first one, I wish you could just raise your hand and shout it out for me. I'd give you a really cool gold star. But the first one, you can imagine, everybody shouted out. I bet some of you did, right? It's ChatGPT. Faster than any other growth that we ever see. I think the closest app that's come to this is actually Threads, but we hit 1 million users in 5 days. And the last I checked, we've got about 1 billion active users that are using this GPT technology. And again, it's not going anywhere. This is just ChatGPT, by the way. We're going to see a bigger and broader approach to more technologies impacting our industry. So all of this, these large language models, this AI, this shift in our industry, and a lot of traditional applications and workloads drives innovation in our industry. So I'm going to talk about this for just a second. What drives these innovations? And most of all, these are decision-making aspects to what you should be doing in a data center facility or a co-location or a cloud. So rack density, cooling, cloud repatriation. We'll talk about that in just a second. And of course, GPUs and the data center, kind of have to mention that one. So the next few slides, get off your shopping list, come back from Amazon. This is your actually really good chance to see the expanded findings from the AFCOM State of the Data Center report. Again, some of these are going to be all new, and some of these nobody has seen yet except for you all. So come on over and check these out. First things first, the density in our facilities is growing. There's no sugarcoating it. Across old school facilities, even like legacy enterprise data centers, all the way to high performance compute cloud architectures, we see that density growing. Right now, it's about 8.5 kilowatts per rack. Last year, it was 7 kilowatts per rack. And the majority of respondents are seeing that these technologies, that this level of density is going to go up. Now, while we're putting more stuff in our environment, we also have to cool it, right? And keep it nice and contained and cool. Now, this finding, oh my gosh, was absolutely fascinating. Check this out. I mean, our cooling solutions meets all of our requirements. Again, this is findings from the latest State of the Data Center report. 46% stated that. Does that mean that 54% are running out of cooling capacity? That's actually the case. There's more density, more high performance compute, more requirements from our facility. So if you're running within a data center, a co-location, or an enterprise facility, and you're like, I'm starting to run out of some capacity here, I need to make a decision of where I should live and where these workloads need to migrate to. Now, that all being said, if you remember the list of stuff that I talked about, our relationship with cloud, it's changing as well. It's not that it's bad, but it's definitely changing as well. So if you take a look at what's happening in our industry, you'll see that there's quite a few things that are changing and evolving. First of all, GPUs in the data center. This is not going anywhere. One of my mentors loved to say that our industry loves innovation as long as it's 10 years old. Now, we don't have 10 years to wait. We need to be adapting these technologies right now. There's a very big, hungry base of customers that don't always want to live in the cloud. So these are decisions that you have to make for your customers and sometimes for your customers' customers to where this information should live. Now, you must rethink your architecture because you need to look outside the box in terms of how you design and work with high density compute, cooling, power requirements, and telecommunications. If this stuff's not in your alley, you might need to look at a partner to help you expand this stuff. And most importantly, you have to adapt or else you become obsolete. There's no room for complacency, especially with these new kinds of workloads that are being developed and done. And things like GPT-5 are even now beginning to be in development. Here's the really crazy part. In our report, we asked the question, do you see cloud repatriation happening? And believe it or not, people are. 83% came back and see that they're seeing workloads repatriate. Now, if you're curious to see which workloads are being repatriated, find me offline. I promise I'll send you that. We just don't have enough time to talk about it. But 83% see this kind of movement happening. Now, let's focus on this for a second. I am not saying you shouldn't go to the cloud, but what we are seeing is a better, more fundamental understanding of what needs to live in the cloud and why. And just because it started in the cloud doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be there. In 2022, our report said that 60% of respondents indicated efforts around cloud repatriation. Today, that is at about 83%. Look, there's going to be pros and cons to each of these. Now we're going to get to the sort of the crux of the question: which one do I work with? Private on-premise gives you a lot of security, a lot of control, but it could be a high capital-intensive process and operation. Sometimes you're just not a data center company, so you need to leave that potentially to somebody who can work on it very well. Public cloud is great, but we also get with the challenge of public spend that's run away because sometimes we forget what's running up there and what's being used and how much we're being charged for. Again, it becomes very challenging, especially around things like data protection and privacy. And if you're doing some of that LLM, GPT kind of architecture, is your data being trained against, or are you fully in control of it? And finally, co-locations. Flexible. Now, by the way, I came from the co-location space, so I saw a lot of the very big positives and benefits from there, but there are high capital costs. And again, you need to understand operations because if you're not there locally, you will need to have someone operating it remotely. Look, I know we're here to talk about this and answer the question, Colo, cloud, on-prem, which one? The answer is, might be all of them, might be a little bit of each. The biggest point here is that you need to understand what your workload is doing, how it's structured, where it needs to live, and ultimately what the cost of this entire architecture would be. There's no right or wrong answer here. That's why I have the hashtag friends forever element there, because that's true in the sense that all of these technologies can work together. But as opposed to in the past, when you might say things like, this just needs to live in the cloud by default, we're no longer saying that because we understand workloads a little bit better and where they need to reside. So we've covered a lot of stuff today. New metrics, new trends in the data center, from cooling to density to new use cases like GPT and large language models. And you need to understand that there are pros and cons to each and every single one of these architectures. But the most important thing for you is that you take a contextual, reflective look at your own environment and deploy accordingly. Now, I know we had a very short amount of time. Find me online. Be sure to submit your questions. I'd be happy to have these discussions more in depth because these are important questions. And again, enjoy the rest of these conversations and make sure you take back a couple of nuggets to make your decision a little bit more fruitful. And with that, back to you.
So I wanted to back up for just a minute, and we will kind of get this thing restarted here. That was Bill had just about finished his keynote, and I think the bulk of the information was there. So what we're going to do now is put up our poll question. And the poll question is, this is the first one of the day. We're going to have some more coming up. We want to know what your time frame is for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company. Everybody has a different time frame. We want to know what yours is. It looks like a lot of you are not sure today. Keep on voting. About a quarter of you are within a couple years. About a fifth of you are within the next year or so, and some of you are doing this right now. Keep on voting. This is really valuable feedback for us and for all of the vendors that are going to be on today and all the people we work with. So keep voting in that, and we are going to now move on to our main event of the day. So we have got our first presenter, our first company ready to go. And the first company up is Rubrik. You may have heard of them. They and presenting for Rubrik today is Matt Castriata. He is the manager of GTM Tech, and he is going to drop some serious knowledge on us right now. So Matt, are you there and ready to go?
I am, Keith.
All right. Well, the floor is yours. You can take the mic and run with it.
Thanks. Appreciate it. And thank you for the time, folks. I'm going to take a little bit of a different angle to this conversation. The keynote was very focused on how you can and what decision points you need to have along the way to determine if you should be in the cloud, if those things were born in the cloud, should they be repatriated back? Are you going to live in a hybrid model moving forward? And I think we all kind of agree that that's sort of the approach and where this is going, is that there are going to be some apps that make sense to live in the data center. There are going to be other apps that make sense to live in a public cloud provider, and obviously apps that make sense to live in a co-location. I think one of the things we have to level set on as a team here is that if things do live in a cloud services provider or in the public cloud, that the public cloud providers are really responsible for the infrastructure and the uptime of the service. What they're not responsible for is the security and protection of the data itself. The data is your responsibility. And as I mentioned, going back to my initial point of taking a different tack to this discussion, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about how you can manage across cloud, across on-prem, across co-locations, how you can unify your management of your data to ensure that recovery is something that you can accomplish if a threat adversary or threats today were to impact your data, not only in the public cloud, but also on premises as well. So that's the approach I'm going to take with this discussion. And let's just jump right into it. As Keith mentioned, I'm Matt Castriata. I manage our emerging tech go-to-market here at Rubrik. That includes our cloud protection as well as unstructured data protection. And in this particular slide here is really just all about what the lay of the land is today. And I think we all know that threat adversaries are after our data. They're going to infiltrate the backup first and then come after the data itself. And really the main objective of the data is to find and exfiltrate sensitive data, right? That's the main objective. Sensitive data can live anywhere, and it doesn't always live where you expect it to be. So I think that that's a really important point here. And that's really the main objective. Encryption is not the main objective. And we do know that cloud environments, particularly global administrative credentials in general, are getting compromised through this lateral movement of the threat adversaries themselves. So cloud data is vulnerable, right? I think that's the message here. And also SaaS data is vulnerable. We see a number of, don't think that because your data is in SaaS platform that it's protected. As I mentioned, their responsibility is to the uptime of the infrastructure and the service itself, and not necessarily to your data. So you have to protect this data like you would protect your on-premises workloads, and ensuring that you can recover if the data were to become compromised. We know the attackers are getting more creative. We know they're able to bypass MFA by leveraging session cookies, and phishing campaigns and account takeovers are becoming more frequent. And knowing that this is happening across the hybrid landscape, on-prem, cloud, SaaS, you really need to have a unified approach across all three of those types of estates. And Rubrik has partnered with Microsoft. We actually won the U.S. and U.K. Partner of the Year award for Microsoft. We have a joint development solution with them, and in providing a world-class cloud and security platform for enterprise and cloud and hybrid cloud customers. So know that Rubrik and Microsoft have a great relationship, and we're here to help. So we know at the end of the day that when the data becomes distributed across the enterprise in IaaS and PaaS or in SaaS, that there are different personas that manage that data, right? In the enterprise, you might have your typical infrastructure or backup admins. In IaaS and PaaS, you may have cloud architects or cloud admins that are interested in the uptime of the data itself. Or in SaaS, you might have your modern workplace admins or your end user compute folks. These folks all need to ensure that the data itself is there and protected and available. And bridging the gap across these teams is not necessarily an easy thing. So that's really what Rubrik has kind of set out to resolve. We also know that from the C-suite and the board, that all of these folks are getting the same questions, right? How would I recover if my environment were impacted? How can I prove it? How can I maintain control and visibility across a fragmented enterprise? When I have some critical assets that live on-prem, I have some critical assets that live in a cloud services provider, and I might have other critical assets that live in SaaS and in SaaS platforms. How can I prove and maintain control and visibility across the enterprise? And we also know that cloud backup is not the same as cyber recovery, right? Cyber recovery is a completely different mechanism from backup and recovery, and that the movement out to the public cloud is complicating this. That you would have multiple accounts and your data would live in multiple accounts. You're responsible for the compliance, the monitoring, the backup and recovery of the data contained in each of those accounts. Sometimes those accounts are distributed by region. Very frequently, they are distributed by region. So you may have multiple instances of the same data geolocated across regions. How do I maintain the operational workflow across all of those regions and all of those accounts? How can I ensure that my compliance and monitoring and backup and recovery is uniform across the estate and across my public cloud estate? And let's not forget that most likely you have on-premises components as well, because again, I haven't met many customers that are 100% in the public cloud. That there are usually some on-prem resources that need to be managed and maintained. How do I keep my visibility across the estate? And this gets more complicated because there are multiple cloud services providers, right? So you could have multiple accounts in AWS, multiple accounts in Azure that are geolocated across regions, as well as Google Cloud. And just take that same slide there and multiply it out by the number of cloud services providers that are out there. The problem becomes really complicated and really difficult to manage and maintain across the estate. So this problem compounds itself as you go and introduce your data to multiple cloud services providers. So the main ideas around this is there's typically a lack of global visibility, right? Can you determine if you were impacted by a cyber event, which systems and applications were compromised, and be able to do that across the estate? And at the end of the day, which teams are responsible for maintaining secure copies of that data and that application, knowing that each deployment model could have different personas that are responsible for the data itself. And then if you have disparate tools across the estate, which is typically what we're seeing folks deploy, how can I consistently recover and test that recovery of multiple systems using multiple recovery tools? And that's really the problem statement here and what Rubrik is looking to set out to resolve. Taking all of those personas, all of the landing spaces for that data, and unifying it in a single control plane. We call it Rubrik Security Cloud. Let's talk a little bit about what Rubrik Security Cloud is and how it works. As I mentioned, you're going to have your workloads across cloud, data center, and SaaS. That's a typical deployment models where we see 95+% of our customers today. If you can provide a single fabric that is immutable and air gapped, because that is those are table stakes, right? You need the ability to recover that data, and you need to make sure that that ability is walled off from the attackers themselves. So if you can provide a single fabric that's immutable and air gapped, and then go and layer on top of that insight about the data, because keep in mind, your backup environment is the only place in your enterprise where you have multiple copies of the same data across days, weeks, and months. So if you can somehow glean insight and move past resiliency, right? Let's not be too concerned about, can I get the data back? What I need to be more worried about is, if I'm impacted, how can I recover quickly? And that's really what providing this layer is all about, is really giving you insight into what's happening to the data so that you can make better decisions upon recovery. And on top of this immutable fabric, we're providing things like data protection, in other words, backup and recovery, encryption detection, which gives you the ability to understand, is there data being impacted in my environment? Is there anomalous behavior? And if there is anomalous behavior, was there any encryption markers associated with that data? Things like sensitive data discovery, because as I mentioned, the threat adversaries, their main objective is to find and exfiltrate sensitive data. They can monetize that regardless of whether you pay a ransom or not. Encryption is really just them flipping off the lights on the way out the door. So understanding where my sensitive data is being stored, where it's being put, is it being put in the right places, and is it permissioned properly, are really key to risk mitigation prior to being impacted. These are questions that your cyber insurers are going to be asking you. So having that information at your fingertips, and with the stringent stringent reporting requirements that are coming along with a data breach, it's really critical to have that information at your fingertips immediately upon impact. Having the ability to identify that last known good backup. What was that last known good copy of the data? So that I can ensure that what I'm recovering is clean and free of malware. The ability to look across the environment to assess risk of your posture, not only your on-prem posture and your backup posture, but soon to be your posture within the cloud itself. Rubrik just announced an acquisition of a data security posture management company called Laminar. So we're going to be making very, very large steps moving forward in the posture management space to understand, do I have buckets in my environment that may not have the right permissions? Do I have sensitive data lurking in S3 buckets that again may not have the right permissions associated with them? These are the kinds of areas that Rubrik is going to be providing visibility, not only for on-prem data, but for data born and living in the cloud. And then the last piece here, which can't go overlooked, is the ability to test recovery, right? You may be using native backup services from the cloud providers, but are you regularly testing your recovery posture? Do you know that you can get the data back if you were impacted? And do you have a process to do so upon impact? I think is really the question there. And again, that's all wrapped in this single control plane we call Rubrik Security Cloud. This is the manager of managers for your estate, whether that data lives on-prem and may be protected with a Rubrik appliance that's racked and stacked in your data center, or whether that data is born and lives in the cloud, whether it's born on cloud native resources or whether it's born on VMs that have been spun up in the cloud. Those are all able to be protected and managed through this single platform. And whether the data lives in a SaaS platform. And our SaaS models today for coverage is Microsoft 365, but we're going all in this space. We're going in hard in this space because we feel like this is a market that needs attention. And we're going to be introducing some other SaaS platforms here in the near future in order to be able to really glean the insights from this data itself. So again, being able to do this in a single control plane is going to remove a lot of the complexity and a lot of the the persona battles that may occur if there were impact, because again, different personas for different data depending on where it lives. That's typically what we're seeing out there. So the ability to secure your IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS environments using a unified protection model in a single pane of glass through this inventory pane. You can see there are some cloud resources and data center resources that live here in this inventory. Being able to manage that with global visibility and control through a single pane of glass. The second is providing backup policies that apply to all of those workloads. So taking a single backup policy or SLA policy and applying it to multiple workloads, whether those workloads live on-prem or whether those workloads live in the cloud or they're SaaS, taking that same backup methodology and applying it to all workloads is really critical there. And then doing that continuous monitoring, right? Once you get past the resiliency discussion, how the answer becomes, how can I protect and recover my data quickly? And the ability to be able to reduce your sensitive data exposure, understanding if there's sensitive information lurking in areas where you don't expect it to be, is one of the benefits of being able to do that kind of work against backup data. It's latent data, typically looked at in the past as an insurance policy. We've activated that data and giving you the ability to be able to find sensitive data over permissioned objects within the environment. The ability to understand if data is being impacted, is there deletions or modifications or even encryption happening to the data. These are all areas where we feel like the backup environment is the best place for that kind of work. So that continuous monitoring of risks and threats in the environment is really the key there. And being able to give you that ability to recover, right? I mean, having and leveraging backup services that are native to the cloud is all fine and good. But having a process to recover that data upon impact, assuming that everything is compromised, assuming that everything has been breached, how do I go and surgically recover apps or files or objects at scale and do that with a near zero RTO is really, really what we're setting out to solve there. On the sensitive data side, having the ability to scan across the estate for a common PII and PHI strings, things like credit card numbers, social security numbers, etc., so that you can see across the estate where that sensitive data lives and who has access, and be able to inventory that for two reasons. Obviously, risk mitigation would be for the first reason, but the second reason would be for breach reporting, right? Breach reporting requirements are becoming more stringent, typically in the 72-hour range now for a public company. So having the ability to do that very quickly when called upon is really going to be critical there. As I mentioned, we don't just take our immutable and air-gapped view to the data center, we're taking it to the cloud as well. We have a managed storage environment we call Rubrik Cloud Vault that's going to give you a logically air-gapped archive. It's a fully managed service. You essentially just buy backend terabytes, and that cost model is very predictable for you and giving you that resiliency in the cloud itself. Here's a view of some of the services that we support. These are also included. Some of this is also included in the handout that is attached to this webinar. And feel free to take a screenshot of this. This is really the support vector right now for cloud services, and we're continuing to evolve this and grow this. What you don't see on here is SaaS. And know that our only SaaS plane that we support today is Microsoft 365. But Jira, Atlassian is coming, and there's other SaaS platforms on the horizon as well. And we have a number of customers, 100% of which have been able to recover their data with Rubrik. Here's a sample of some customers here, and again, happy to talk to you about any of these use cases if you're interested in learning more. Last thing I'm going to leave you with here is a shout out to a couple of teams within Rubrik. That's our ransomware response team. This didn't format properly, so my apologies. That's our ransomware response team and our Rubrik Zero Labs. Our ransomware response team are a group of really, really skilled support engineers that are at your beck and call if you were to be impacted. This is a free service that every one of our customers gets. This is not something you have to pay for. If you call into our support line and you mention the word ransomware, you're automatically routed to this team, and they hold your hand through the recovery, and they leave when you tell us to go away. So know that team exists and are there to help you through any sort of impact. And then the last shout out I'll give is to our Rubrik Zero Labs team. This team thus far has been responsible for creating some thought leadership about what our customers are seeing out there. There is a Zero Labs report that was created, and feel free to Google it. The latest report out there was released a few months ago. The guy who runs our Rubrik Zero Labs is also going to be doing some work in threat intelligence as well. And hopefully in the near future, Rubrik is going to become a source of threat intelligence so that you can go and scan your backups proactively, looking for maybe some latent threats that might be out there that haven't detonated yet and haven't caused you any issues. So know that Rubrik is looking to be more proactive, to understand if people are escalating privileges where they're not supposed to, or if latent threats might live in your data. These are the kinds of things that Rubrik is interested in providing for you, and obviously definitely bookended by our acquisition of Laminar and our ability to understand what is the current posture of our customers' data within their cloud environments. So with that, I'll take any questions if there are any. If not, thank you for the time, and I'll kick things back to the moderator. Thanks.
Okay, thanks so much, Matt. We absolutely do have some questions, but first I want to put up a poll question for everyone to answer. So while we are chatting and going over some of the great questions that came in, let us know what additional information you would like from Rubrik. A lot of great stuff that Matt showed us today, and so we want to know how they can follow up with you. So let's get into a couple questions then. First, Pam wants to know, does Rubrik support data governance and authentication together?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We will be able to. You can authenticate into the Rubrik environment using any number of tools. We do integrate with SAML authentication tools. So if you're using a directory service to authenticate, we can plug into that. But know that directory services very often become compromised in an attack. So having a local backdoor account, and then also being able to put MFA on that local account is really important as well. So that is all offered within the platform as well. From a sensitive data perspective, absolutely. We do scan our estate for sensitive information and report on that. One of the things that we're going to be stepping into is this idea of tying privilege escalation with sensitive data exposure so that you can understand if privileges are being escalated, what type of sensitive data might be at risk. And those are futures that are coming. as we move further up the kill chain and into more of proactive security, that's an area of interest for us for sure.
Okay, great. Got time, I think, just for a couple more questions here. So Chris wants to know, does Rubrik support Duo for two-factor authentication?
Yes.
Yes. Simple and direct and to the point.
That's
the kind of answers that I like. All right. So can you talk for a few minutes to answer Jeffrey's question about the integrations that Rubrik has?
Yeah, great. Thank you for bringing that up. So a lot of our focus on the integration side, when we first started understanding like where should we spend our time when it comes to integrations, because most integrations are checkboxes, frankly. So if we're going to create integrations, we want them to be meaningful, right? And I think that's sort of been the North Star that's guided us along the way as we look at integrations. And one of the areas that we really spent a lot of time on is in SIEM and SOAR integrations, because we feel like these are the areas that the security teams are spending most of their time, trying to understand what's happening to the environment. SIEM integrations are going to obviously give you that signal. Hopefully that's separated from the noise, because SIEMs tend to be noisy. It's going to give you that signal that's going to tell you that something might be going on. And then if you have workbooks that are created with SOAR platforms, you can push actions back. Maybe push an action back to an endpoint, maybe push an action back to the backup environment. So Microsoft Sentinel and Palo Alto's Cortex XSOAR are really two areas of integration that we focused on. Recently, we released integration with Zscaler. Now, this is actually a really interesting integration, because DLP tools in general are only as good as where you tell them to look, right? If you tell a data loss prevention tool to monitor a location for egress, it's only as good as where you tell them to monitor. And we know that sensitive data doesn't always live where you expect it to be. So being able to inform a tool like Zscaler and tell Zscaler, hey, there's a bunch of sensitive data in this location or that location, will give Zscaler more information to be able to monitor your estate to understand if there's sensitive data being exfiltrated. So our Zscaler integration was definitely is fairly new integrations, probably about 3 or 4 months old at this point, and is certainly one that we're putting a lot of time and attention into. The last one I'll leave you with was this concept around posture management. We know that in cloud environments, configuration is just as important as data. And how do I monitor the configuration of my cloud environments? How do I monitor if my buckets are over permissioned, or if data is exposed, or all of those things are happening in my cloud environments? This is an area. Posture management was definitely an area of interest for us, and we this week announced, actually it was last week, announced the acquisition of a company that's leading the space for data security posture management called Laminar. So we're really excited about that acquisition. More to come there. That's going to be included in the Rubrik tool set. But these are areas of interest for us to be a little bit more proactive and help our customers be a little bit more proactive about security. Hopefully that was
sounds
helpful.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to seeing what comes of that acquisition. Well, Matt, this was a lot of fun. You've got so many questions coming in. It's obvious you struck a nerve here. We can't get to any more right now, but I have no doubt that Rubrik will be following up with everyone on this. So thanks again for your time and for joining us today, Matt.
All right. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, it is time to do our very first gift card drawing for today. And as I mentioned at the beginning, these are $300 gift cards, and the winner of the very first one on this event is Lalit Aurora from Wisconsin. Congratulations to you, Lalit. We will be in touch with you very soon about claiming your prize. Okay, up next, we've got something else for you. We want your feedback again for something really important for us. We want you to help us make our events even better in the coming year. So let us know in the questions tab what topics you most want to see covered in 2024. What are the areas you want to know more about in the coming year? What deserves more coverage? Let us know also throughout the event. So this is not just while this slide is up. We want you to tell us all through the rest of the event, and we will be looking at these, and we will actually be making decisions based on what you're telling us. So please let us know what kind of stuff you want to see, what kind of coverage are you looking for in the new year, and we very much appreciate any help you can give us with that. All right, and it is time now to move on to our next presentation. Joining us now for TierPoint and Dell Technologies are Chris Patterson, Dan Mraz, and Joel Frank. They are ready to go, so I am going to turn the floor over to those gentlemen. Take it away. I don't know who's going to be speaking first, but the mic is yours.
Thank you. This is Chris Patterson. I want to welcome everyone to our session titled Best Practices for Workload Placement in a Multi-Cloud World, presented by TierPoint and Dell Technologies. There are many different types of cloud out there: public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, and it can be a bit overwhelming to decide where should you run your workloads. The dirty little secret is there is no one size fits all. There is no perfect cloud for everything out there. And it really takes an informed eye to determine how can you best set up your environment to use a cloud or a series of clouds to make your environment run as best as possible. Today, you'll hear from both Dan Rose and Joel Frank from Dell, who work on the cloud and container team, as well as myself, Chris Patterson. I am a product director at TierPoint. So we're going to start with Dan. Take it away.
Hey, Chris, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Great to be here. And we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump right in. We think about a lot of organizations on this multi-cloud journey. It really focuses around workloads and workload placement. And I have the joy of having 4 kids. If you don't have 4 kids, don't catch up. And if you do have 4 or more kids, please let me know how you do it. But of course, my world revolves around my kids. And so when I think about, and I'm helping customers, I think about my kids. And I always come up with these 3 items here. Workloads are alive, just like our children. They're alive. We have to care and feed them. We have to choose their name carefully, just like we need to choose our software and our solutions carefully. And like our children, they evolve, and we hope to learn and get out of the house, if you will. And that comes to the portability. And so I think about applications, same thing. We have applications that are very archaic, and we have applications that are more cloud native and newer. But in all, our workloads are evolving around what we need our applications to do and where our organization wants to go. And more today, we need portability and mobility of our applications. And so same thing with my kids. I hope when they go off to college, they don't come back and sit in the garage like maybe a mainframe might be. But ultimately, just want to start out with something slightly jovial, if you will. I'm going to build out this slide. When we think about workload placement in cloud, I have a lot of conversations, and of course you have to include Dilbert there, as we can't just solve a problem with techie things like Kubernetes. On the left side, 99.9% of the time, I'm doing more working with customers on people and processes. The technology is the easy part, but as we're evolving our organizations, we're transforming our organizations, we really need to think about how that affects people. How do we get folks to work together? When I think of dev and ops is not something you can buy. It is something that is truly cultural within an organization. And so I wanted to toss out 2 books that I really, really enjoy. When I have, consultative conversations with customers, I ask them what their strategy is. And a lot of times I get tactics. Well, we're going to do this, and this. But what is a strategy? And I love the book, I Have a Strategy, No You Don't. It's a short book. It's a quick read. And it gets everybody on the same page of what a strategy really is. And I go back over here to the DevOps Handbook because, again, it's people in process. And what I love about the DevOps Handbook is it tells stories about how organizations have evolved, have transformed. And so with that baseline, I want to get into what I see a lot of times in the field from a journey to the multi-cloud. And this is about workloads. But normally, if we're thinking about moving workloads or placing workloads, it's generally in different locations. We're thinking about utilizing it differently. And so I see a lot of organizations wanting to move to what's on the right side of the screen, this panacea of multi-cloud, whether it's private, public, at the edge, or some type of X as a service, software as a service, platform as a service. But I think about this in a time-bound journey. I kind of stuck a stake in the ground and says, hey, most organizations were virtualized. We stopped thinking that virtualization was voodoo, and we probably had some component of software as a service. Think about email. And I don't want to really manage an Exchange box anymore because Office 365 and Google have figured out how to do email a lot better, a lot smoother than what I can potentially do. So that was kind of the start. And then we saw a lot of organizations for many different reasons say, hey, we're going to be cloud first. Whether it was someone in the boardroom saying, look how easy it is to provision this workload. Let's get out of the data center business. Let's take all of this and it's going to solve all our problems. And I know everybody on the phone and the webcast is probably saying, well, we know, that didn't always work. I work with a lot of customers that were cloud first, and they've built huge silos of problems and pains that now, they're bimodal or trimodal. The cost of change is real, meaning how we move a workload, we need to think about how does that change our effects on our human resources and how and what they know, and have we told them correctly on where we're moving? And the cost of change also really relies around the risks that we're taking by moving this. And so for a number of reasons, sometimes cloud first worked. A lot of times it didn't. Most customers would say to me, Dan, cloud first was really expensive and a big problem for us. But, I think back in the virtualization days, it was more of a IT built the infrastructure and the lines of business needed to live within it. What was really interesting, and this is an IDC study, in 2019, the line of business spend actually exceeded traditional IT spend. And what that told me and what the story told was because a lot of cloud providers came out and said, you know what, rather than having to go to IT to get this workload to run in their environment, now I can host this as a service model, and I can go directly to the line of business. And we know what some of the problems caused there. It also said, it also called in the question, is IT a cost center for an organization, or is it strategic to the organization? And, you saw kind of a split, and CISOs, chief information security officers are like, well, where's my data going? The line of business is moving my data somewhere else. We don't know the survivability, the RTO, the RPO, is it being backed up, and all that kind of stuff. And so you saw this divergence, if you will. And where I see a lot of organizations at today is saying, you know what? IT can't be a cost center. We need to gain value out of IT. We need to enable the line of business that truly drives where our business wants to go. And so we see the changes of where CTOs and CIOs and chief digital officers sit within organizations that truly are strategic to the goals of the business. And to do that, and what drives all of those goals is truly the workloads. And so, hey, line of business, what are the workloads? Let's do some business dependency mapping and understanding, how many people utilize this, what goes on. And to do that, I'm not going to steal too much thunder from Joel. Joel's going to talk a little bit about this, but this is where I see customers truly succeed. There's a lot of different modern enterprise architectures, TOGAF being one of them out there, and they're heavy. They're heavy on the process. They're heavy on the people, if you will. But I've worked with organizations to really break this down and say, what are your principles? What are you truly trying to do as you make this investment, you transform, as you want to leverage the multi-cloud? What are the reasons you're doing it? And write those principles down. And every time you get into a situation where I'm not sure what to do, go back to your principles and say, yes, this may be a major change from where we are today. However, we need to make this major change to match up to our principles. And then build profiles for those workloads, build profiles for what it looks like in the private, what it looks like in the public, what it looks like in the edge. And what about if I retire, think about the R's of repatriation. Okay, I add repatriation, but, retiring or replatforming and things of that nature. And then as you build those profiles, build it for a tier one app. Classify your apps. Tier one is going to have this RTO, RPO. This is how we're going to deal with disaster recovery, business continuity. Make it very streamlined and standardize it. And so you have a clear picture on what it would look like in any of those cloud models. Understand the attributes. And again, Joel's going to cover these in a little bit more detail. And finally, the laws of the land. Where can I place some of these things? Is there anything I'm beholden to from a compliance perspective? What are the true economics of it? What about the laws of physics? Is it going to change the ability for line of business to do the work if we're going to move the application somewhere else? And the last part of all this is, how are we going to make this seamless for our users? And this is where I get into a true multi-cloud. The users don't need to know what cloud it's sitting in, but we want to enable self-service. A lot of times we see principles as in, hey, I want to offer self-service to customers in a service in X amount of minutes, if you will. And this is where we get at the bottom of the page here, coags. This is a thing I run into very often. It's not a fun or pretty analogy or acronym, but if I have data across all of these clouds and I need to orchestrate workloads across all of these clouds, how do I come up with a common orchestration, automation, governance, security model? And this is where infrastructure as code comes in. This is where that self-service portal comes in and how we do that. And something we help customers with every day, inside and out, and develop that strategy and help folks live up to that DevOps workload. So I'm going to turn it over to Joel, and he's going to talk a little bit about specifically the 4 boxes, the principles, the profiles, the attributes, and laws of, and double click into those. Joel?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So let's dive right in. So the first thing that Dan touched on were these principles, and that's really what it is. These are going to be the things that are most aligned to your business goals. So they could be things like, hey, everything we do has to have an exit strategy, or everything we're required to comply with certain regulatory bodies. So all of these things have to align to that. Or maybe the business has a 5-year plan and IT needs to align to that. So we're going to start putting together these principles. And like Dan mentioned, this is the filter that we're going to use as we make decisions and as we move forward to know we're staying true to these principles and true to the alignment with the business goals. And then let's talk a little bit more about the profiles. So how are we going to define these workloads, these applications? Are they tier 1, tier 2? Is it a prod environment? Is it test and development? And what is it going to look like if it's on-prem in my data center or in a Colo? What is it going to look like if it's in one of the public hyperscalers? And which hyperscaler? So would those have a different profile depending on where they land? And we really have to interview our people. It's very important to find out, like, how are we even using these applications? Are some of these so old that there's all these subtle nuances and there's all this tribal knowledge that's just not bubbling up and passing on that we need to be aware of? And what happens if this application goes down, or if we take it offline for certain things? What's the actual cost? Is there a certain number of sales hours lost? Say, for example, if it's a sales application or something that the sales team needs to conduct their business. So really, you just want to dig in and understand what each of these things look like, what they're going to cost, and where they are in your multi-cloud architecture and what they're going to perform like. And the attributes. So, I mean, a lot of this, as you'll see, digs into RTO, RPO, disaster recovery, business continuity. So this is pretty straightforward. So just how am I going to govern all this? And not only how am I going to govern all this, but when we're talking about data is the new oil, right? So where is my data and how am I going to utilize it? How can I monetize it or mine it? Do I even know where this data is? And so these are the attributes that you want to dig into a little bit and figure out, what is that going to look like? And then finally, the laws of the land. Some of these are set for us, right? So there's regulatory bodies, there's government requirements depending on your industry and what needs to happen. And of course, there's very, very real cost to all of these things. And so these are things that you must weigh. And of course, latency is a very real thing. So I can move my application somewhere else, but is the performance going to degrade because now I'm introducing additional latency that wasn't there? So again, these are just a little bit more detail into these 4 pieces of the multi-cloud puzzle. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dan to wrap it up for us.
Hey, Joel, thanks very much. And I know we went through this pretty quickly, but ultimately wanted to give you sort of a framework of what we see being successful and simplified. A lot of folks get overburdened with a lot of this and say, I'm not really sure how to do this or how to go about it, how to attack it, but it doesn't have to be as complex as, a very strong enterprise architecture. So in summary, to kind of bring this to a close, is every organization is unique. Every organization I do workshops with, they all have unique principles. They all have unique situations. Align it to the business goals. IT is going to be in a great position if we can quantify what these workloads would look like. What are we giving back to the business? What does it take for the investment to meet the RTOs and RPOs? You got to quantify that and align it back to the business. Build on your principles. That is the cornerstone, I believe, of success for both IT and the organization as a whole. And build those principles with your stakeholders, with your line of business. Building those workload profiles and truly understanding and matching to the type of tiers and what the expectation of those workloads are. A production app, a tier 1 app may sit in one location where a test dev or a non-prod sits somewhere else because economically it makes the most sense. And so it is cumbersome, a bit of work. We've got worksheets and stuff that we've helped and align, but then also align it to your teams and your staff and your line of business. Choose your partners and architectures that live up to your principles and can sustain your principles. And then you're able to modernize and invest in your future. So with all of your workloads, I hope they are alive. I hope they have evolved, and I hope they do not move into your basement at the end of their life. I'd like to introduce Chris again, who's going to talk about some real-world multi-cloud examples. We work very much with TierPoint on customers that are on this multi-cloud journey, and definitely want Chris to go over some of those examples of how they and Dell have helped those organizations. Chris, turn it over to you.
Thank you. And for the record, I also have 4 kids, one of whom after college. So do as I say, not as I do when it comes to this sort of thing. So I want to thank Dan and Joel for providing a great framework.
Wouldn't be any fun without an audio issue. Okay, so I do want to thank Dan and Joel for providing the framework of how and where to place workloads based on individual profiles. And wanted to talk a little bit about how we put that framework into effect for our customers. So here at TierPoint, when we talk to our customers about the stops on the cloud journey, we generally talk about 3 different platforms. The first is co-location. This is just simple space and power, which affords our customers the greatest control over the resources. You can use Dell servers, HP servers, IBM servers, run whatever applications you want. And it's great for applications or hardware that can't be virtualized. This is really about just if you want to get out of the data center business, you don't want the time, expense, and manpower required to keep a building up and running just for servers. That's where we see a lot of folks looking for co-location. The second is for private clouds. These are more fixed resources with predictable cost and performance. You get your own servers, your own storage, your own networking. And it's a fixed price each month. You know exactly how much you're going to pay, and you also know what level of performance you're going to get. We find that this is very good, in particular for steady state or sensitive applications. If you have some sort of application that runs 24/7, well, that's generally a great fit for a private cloud because you wouldn't get the savings of public cloud from turning it on and off in the hourly billing model. And then finally, public cloud is great for those applications, in Dan's words, that are built cloud first. It affords unlimited resources with a very flexible deployment and billing model. And it's great for those cloud native or dynamic applications. Traditionally, what we've seen is most of our customers will run a combination of these. We see a lot of folks who will use private cloud or Colo or public cloud as their production, and then disaster recovery on public cloud or our in-house multi-tenant cloud, which is sort of in the middle between public and private. So from here, I want to talk about a couple of our specific customer examples. So first we have and I'm sorry, it's not letting me advance the slide. If someone else wouldn't mind doing that.
We see diverse workloads right now. You want modern, Chris?
I want diverse workloads, yes.
Okay, I got you on there.
All right. Yeah, I seem to be having some issues. So for the first one is, this was a customer in the manufacturing space, and they had a number of workloads running on both a traditional VMware stack as well as an IBM AIX platform. They initially came to us because they had a need for a DR site for their AIX platform, and as a Unix platform, you can't really port that application or data to a traditional cloud environment like a hyperscaler. Since we knew that the AIX box couldn't go into the cloud, we knew that there was going to be at least some environment in our data center, and so to optimize the connectivity and get high-speed connections between the Unix and VMware environments, we chose to deploy a private cloud for their VMware DR site. In the same data center, simple fiber running between them, so they were able to get a coherent, cohesive DR site. They ended up liking it so much that a couple of years later, they ended up moving their production environment, both AIX and VMware, into one of our other data centers so that they could then shut down their data centers and their IT team could focus on more interesting projects. So our next one, a modern application, which hopefully we can see, is a social media company with an application that was truly cloud first. The app was designed to run on containers to allow for scalability and portability. They were initially running on 2 public clouds, but they wanted that stability and predictability of a private cloud and the quicker and more ready support that comes from a service provider. So we were able to stand up a container environment in one of our data centers, along with all the accompanying network components. And now they're able to seamlessly move workloads between public and private, depending on changing needs. And they have access to our team of experts whenever they have any issues. Our next one is repatriation from the public cloud. And this is a story that we're starting to see more and more. This customer forklifted their application into the public cloud because, again, wanted to get out of their own data center, but they didn't really take the time to examine the application, to understand it, and to refactor or tune it properly for running in the public cloud. As a result, after launching the application, the performance really wasn't as good as they expected, and their end users complained. So they came to TierPoint. We additionally did a proof of concept for the application on our multi-tenant cloud because we were able to spin that up quickly to support their testing. And they liked it so much, we deployed a private cloud for them, but kept the multi-tenant around for DER purposes. As a result, they're getting much more predictable costs and performance, end up saving $5,000 a month relative to public cloud, and their app performs 5 times faster. So the final is a customer who was running an ERP solution in a private cloud. And again, this is very common. This is a great use for private cloud because it's an ERP platform, is always running, generally needs a lot of horsepower, and you get predictable cost and performance. That's, and that's something that a lot of our customers enjoy. But they were looking to innovate like many other companies, and they wanted to take advantage of all of this data that they had gathered about their customers, but they didn't want to have the expense of running an application within the private cloud, having all those extra resources that they were only going to use on the weekends or once a month. So we helped them expand into the public cloud and set up a data warehouse there so that they can do that big processing, again, weekly, monthly, bi-monthly, and they have access to huge amounts of resources when they need it. But then aside from the storage, they're really only paying for those cloud resources when they are doing the analysis. So I will hand it back to Dan.
Actually, Chris, this is your closing slide. So I think it's really, if you'd like to speak to someone about your cloud needs, you can certainly reach out to sales@tierpoint.com. We work closely with TierPoint and Chris and his team, helping customers kind of map this out and doing workshops and things of that nature. So certainly want to thank the opportunity, thanks to have the opportunity to work with TierPoint, as well as be here today to talk about workload placement in the cloud. So I think there's a poll and some questions.
There sure is. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you guys working with us through those glitches and for your time today. This has been fascinating. Actually, the delay has kind of taken our Q&A time, but there are some coming in, and I am sure you will be following up with all the questions that come in. So once again, everyone, thank you for your time today. Thanks for a great presentation, even if it was a little bit glitchy, and we really appreciate it. So thank you. All right, and so hopefully we've gotten all of the bugaboos behind us. We are going to move on to the next thing, which is our poll question. So TierPoint and Dell, that presentation, let us know what you want from them. Tell them how to contact you, how basically to move you to the next stage of your relationship with them. And keep voting here for another couple of minutes. I think we are hopefully safely past those issues. And once again, my apologies for everything that's going on. We are at the point of getting ready to now give away our next gift card. So it's another $300 gift card, the second one of the day. And as Jess mentioned at the beginning, you do have to remain in attendance through the entire event to be eligible for the card. And the winner of the next card is Tom Poole from California. I saw Tom on here a little while ago. So congratulations to you, Tom. We will be in touch with you about claiming your prize. With that, we are now going to come to our final presentation of today's event. This session is going to be from Rackspace and VMware, and our presenter today is Itari Igoroje, the Chief Architect for Strategy and Apps from the Office of the CTO. So, Itari, thank you so much for being here today. Are you ready to go?
Yes, I'm ready to go. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you great, so I'm going to turn it over to you. The ball is in your court.
All right. Thanks for the introduction there. So again, hi guys. My name's Atari, Chief Architect for Strategy Apps, Office of CTO. Going to be talking about the differences, obviously, between Colo, private cloud, public cloud. When do you choose one over the other? Some of Rackspace's services and offerings that we have in this regard, and typically how you move to each of these targets. All right. So to level set, I think the first thing is just to kind of understand what Colo, private cloud, public cloud is, at least from Rackspace's point of view. So Colo, from our definition, is it allows customers to run their own self-managed hardware in data centers. So typically, Rackspace will provide the customer space, power, cooling, physical network connections, and the customer is responsible for everything else in that data center. Private cloud. This allows customers access a single tenant infrastructure and managed services platform. We do have different cloud platforms. VMware is one of our primary private cloud offerings that we provide for our customers. The customer gets, obviously, in addition to all the benefits from Colo, the customer gets cloud infrastructure, which includes optimized physical servers, hypervisors, and the management platform for the cloud. And then public cloud is very, very similar to private cloud, but this is hosted on third-party vendors. And the key thing here is it provides multi-tenant infrastructure and managed services platforms. Private cloud is typically single tenant, not all the time, but primarily single tenant. And then public cloud is multi-tenant, where you can achieve a lot of economies of scale. What the customer gets typically is a cloud infrastructure management platform. They can access the public cloud, etc. So I just want to level set. These are the different definitions of at least how Rackspace defines these terms. So this is an overview of Rackspace's Colo services. On the left side, I like to call this the OSI model for apps, right? So you see all the different layers to support your apps in a Colo environment. The bottom two in the red is a responsibility for a provider like Rackspace. We take care of the physical space, we take care of networking, we take care of power, we take care of cooling, all of that stuff. And then everything above that, the customer is responsible for it, right? This just gives an overview of our Rackspace service. We do have, obviously, N+1 resiliency design for power, electricity. We have a lot of efficient processes around change management, so we have our data centers are certified, PCI, FedRAMP, the security in place. So essentially, there's a lot of services that a customer will typically do in their own data centers. Those are handled. So essentially, all these services are what are handled in the bottom red on the left. So reasons to move to the Colo, and I think you guys might have heard some of this in the presentation early on, but I'll kind of still go over these again. I think one of the key things, obviously, is avoiding data center costs. Right now, running and managing your own data centers isn't necessarily a competitive advantage, especially with a lot of the outsourced data centers out there. So some customers just don't want to deal with that. So that's one of the key things in terms of moving to the Colo. Another thing is guaranteed redundancy. It's possible you could run your own data centers, but you don't have backup generators, right? You don't have redundant networking and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's better for a Colo provider to just do that for you. You don't have to worry about it. Another key reason is also security and compliance. Obviously, if you're running your own data center, you have to provide compliance and security in all different levels, the physical, the platforms, everything, right? But you can have a third-party provider handle all of that, and you don't have to invest in those types of security and compliance requirements. Network connectivity, there are some times that you want to connect to third-party providers through dedicated lines. A lot of Colo providers already have that network connectivity already in place. So that's something that you don't also have to worry about. That's another reason. Financial flexibility. This one is a big one, the whole CapEx versus OpEx model. CapEx, for example, allows customers to be able to, for their income statement, if they do CapEx, they can actually maximize the revenue that they make, right? They can also surely have things that they have on their balance sheet that they're investing in the future. So every customer has reasons why that could be beneficial. OpEx model could be good for customers that are just starting up. They don't have a lot of money to invest up front. And, so there's different reasons why a customer will either do CapEx or OpEx in comparison to a private cloud, a Colo and a public cloud, right? So that's one reason there. Legacy support, there could be a lot of non-virtualized apps and infrastructure that you need to run that you can't run in virtualized infrastructure. High performance computing clusters, mainframes, just something that you can't run on virtualized infrastructure, and you need to have that. Another thing is just complete control. Some folks want control over their physical infrastructure. They might be able to have proprietary ways to benefit from that infrastructure. It just depends, but they just want that control. And then specialized infrastructure, very similar to kind of legacy applications, but these are special types of infrastructure that you cannot run on virtualized. So, for example, in addition to the high-performance computing clusters and mainframes, you can also have PBX telephony systems. You could have proprietary storage, custom chassis. There's all sorts of things. So these are the reasons, some of the reasons why, the common reasons why someone will want to move to a Colo like Rackspace as opposed to running in their own data center. Rackspace private cloud services, right? So like I mentioned, in this case, you do get a single tenant private cloud. It's an IT as a service platform. It abstracts all the underlying physical and networking infrastructure and provides an actual API programmable way to manage infrastructure. And then at Rackspace, a lot of our private cloud offerings, the majority is SDDC. We call it software defined data center. We do have different offerings there. So we have SDDC Flex, Business, and Enterprise. They still provide VMware vCenter accessible infrastructure, but there's different level of services, and you can think of these as different tiers, right? And then there's other services that we have in private cloud. But if you look at the left again, in terms of the OSI, I like to call it the OSI model for applications running in a data center. This shows the delegation of responsibilities. So everything in red is what Rackspace handles. So when it comes to the physical servers, the hypervisors, all that stuff, Rackspace manages it as well as the physical infrastructure. For the middleware in the OS, that is something that's a shared responsibility. Sometimes Rackspace can help manage that for clients. Sometimes clients manage it by themselves, but pretty much everything above that, the runtime of their applications, their data, the actual apps, it's all the customer's responsibility. So this is essentially what Rackspace provides. We manage everything below, and then the customer manages everything on top. In addition to standard design, redundant design, high availability, 24/7, 365 support, proactive capacity management, that's what we provide as well for that service. Quick time check. Okay. So reasons to move to the private cloud as opposed to maybe a public cloud or a colo. I think one key reason is short of infrastructure expertise. If you do not want to worry about servers and there's nothing specific around managing servers, you could just outsource that to a company like Rackspace, and we'll give you a virtual platform where you can actually have a SDDC where you can provision and configure your infrastructure in a virtual manner. Predictable cost in for workloads in private cloud as opposed to the public cloud. If you have consistent workload usage, it might make a lot of sense to have that run in a private cloud because you can manage the cost, you can plan accordingly because there's no variable there. And then also, sometimes it could actually be cheaper to run workloads in the private cloud as opposed to the public cloud, right? Because, and that's the whole use case that's happening nowadays, which is cloud repatriation, where it gets to a point where the public cloud gets too expensive and it makes more sense to actually run that and achieve economies of scale there. So that's another reason. I mentioned earlier consistent performance. If you have consistent workloads, they're not spiky, they're not one-off computational workloads, and you want to avoid the situation of performance degradation by having, as a result of noisy neighbors. That's one of the benefits to potentially have a private cloud as well. Programmable model compared to Colo with the private cloud, you can actually provision infrastructure and configure it via APIs, which allows all sorts of different models, enable a DevOps model, embrace agility, that type of stuff. Legacy support is also another reason to move to private cloud. If you do have virtualized applications that are running on-prem, those virtualized applications can run on a virtualized platform as well. So that's one reason. Control as well. You know, you might not want to be running your workloads in the public cloud, right? You like to kind of touch and feel and see the servers in the private cloud. So that's another reason. And then security and compliance. You know, now from a public cloud, private cloud perspective, I think they're both secure, but I think primarily the advantage from a private cloud is when it comes to data sovereignty and privacy laws. There are some rules and compliance regulations that say data can't leave a country or a region. In that case, private cloud solutions might be the better option to comply with those regulations as opposed to having it in a public cloud. Public cloud services, and how am I doing on time? Just want a quick check, just to make sure. Okay, all right. So public cloud services, very, very similar to private clouds in terms of a programmable API where you can spin up infrastructure. Typically, the big hyperscalers that have public cloud infrastructure, obviously AWS, Azure, and Google. Some of the key characteristics of this, it's multi-tenant, it's global, multi-region, there's virtually unlimited scale. On the left side, the OSI model for the services, essentially the hyperscalers manage everything below in red, and then at the top, the customers as well as the hyperscalers can manage that, right? Because cloud provides not only infrastructure services, they also provide platform services. They also provide application services, data services, and a host of other things, right? So that's kind of public cloud in a nutshell. From a Rackspace perspective, we do have services that complement the infrastructure services that these hyperscalers provide. So we can do a lot of architecture and design of the platform for clients. We do have Elastic Engineering. Essentially, it's a pod of resources that can provide ongoing optimizations to your environment. And then we also have managed operations. Essentially, this is 24/7 monitoring, incident troubleshooting, remediation, etc. So why would you want to use the public cloud as opposed to private cloud or Colo? First one is unlimited capacity. Basically, you can scale to your heart's content, so virtually unlimited capacity, and also global presence. If you have an application and you need to have that app deployed in US and Asia and South America, all over the globe, you can do that fairly quickly while using the public cloud. Cost effective, it can be cost effective depending on the workloads. So if you're running small workloads, for example, a dev or a QA environment, if you're working spiky workloads that don't have too much usage, or if you're running one-off computational workloads, some batch process that processes a bunch of data at the end of every month, those are when cloud is beneficial. It's very, very cost effective. Experimentation, because how simple the public cloud is, the number of services they have, it's very, very easy to do some experiments and test new ideas rapidly. We have an idea of building out a Hadoop cluster. Okay, rather than us trying to invest in building out that cluster specifically, you can just spin up a service in the public cloud, test it. If it works, that's great. You can double down. If it doesn't, you move on, right? So that's a good thing. It does have a program model, just like private cloud. I won't delve too much in that. Cloud native transformation. So you can build a lot of cloud native apps in public cloud to take advantage of all the cloud native tools and technologies that already exist. And you can optimize for performance, scalability, cost, agility. There's a lot of things that you can do there. Innovation, being able to leverage innovative solutions, because the cloud, they're throwing out new solutions virtually like every month. There's some new service that they're offering. A good example right now is just AI. You can go in and build an application that has a lot of sophisticated AI services based off of a lot of the open LLM models that are already out there. And you can actually have functioning applications just like that without investing too much, just using a cloud service. So public cloud obviously provides a lot of that. Security and compliance as well. In comparison to Colo, the hyperscalers already provide security on all different layers. And then also the last thing is just latest updates. The cloud services, whether it's ISC, whether it's platform, whether it's applications, typically they're up to date. So when it comes to security patches, when it comes to new versions of software, when it comes to functionality, that is really, really, really good. All right. So how to choose? Again, I mentioned a bunch of reasons why people go to Colo, private cloud, or public cloud at Rackspace. So in general, I'm just going to touch on the themes on the customers that we see and why they choose one of these clouds. One thing I wanted to highlight too is that a lot of customers have hybrid scenarios as well. So it's not always just everything is in one cloud or the other. And I think that's one of the things with Rackspace is that we provide that for customers, that hybrid setup. They could have different workloads that are in each of these clouds for whatever reason. But these are just kind of the high-level overviews of why customers choose one workload over the other. For Colo, you want to manage your servers, but you don't want to worry about the data center, the physical building, the power, the cooling, etc. You can go with Colo. You have specialized infrastructure. You have legacy non-virtualized workloads. And then if you want your financial model, CapEx or OpEx, if you want a CapEx model, Colo is favorable there. For private cloud, if you want a predictable cost model, you have virtualized workloads. You want to be able to have programmable infrastructure. And then you want to be able to satisfy specific security regulations and compliance, specifically data sovereignty. That's a good reason to use private cloud. Public cloud, very similar to private cloud. And so in addition to all the benefits, most of the benefits from private cloud, public cloud does have things like unlimited capacity, global scale. You can modernize your cloud native workloads if you want to be able to take advantage of the cloud native tools and technologies. Public cloud provides that. Experimentation and innovation, being able to move quickly, fail fast is something public cloud provides. And then if you have spiky, inconsistent workloads, one-off computational workloads, those are the general reasons why to choose one or the other. And then last but not the least, just kind of touching on the migration approaches for all of these target cloud platforms. Rackspace does provide a lot of services around migrations to each of these different destinations. This kind of touches on a little bit how we typically do migrations for these different targets, right? So for example, for Colo, it's actual physical data center migrations. We actually take your servers, mainframes, whatever infrastructure that you have. We have trucks that those go under. There's a whole bunch of processing to ensure that things happen as planned. We do have smart hands that can cable hookup, ensure everything's up and running. And we have a very structured detail in terms of how we do that. So that's typically how we do migrations for Colo. For private cloud, basically we can do virtual migrations, lift and shift via block level migration, via dedicated network or VPN via public cloud. We can also do a physical migration of storage devices. There are some times where clients have tons of storage and it doesn't make any sense. They want to use those storage devices. We can just move those over. And then also, if the customer has a lot of automation already in place, CI/CD pipelines to deploy their applications, we can leverage that just to deploy those to the private cloud target. And then there's greenfield deployments. What we mean by that essentially is you can spin up a server and then just reinstall the application full in some sort of policy book or some sort of standard operating procedure for installing that software. And then for public cloud, kind of similar. We can do block level virtual migration via the network. We can use migration appliances for each of the three main hyperscalers. For AWS, they have Snowball, Azure has Databox, GCP has a transfer appliance. So this is where you have tons of data and it's kind of prohibitive to actually do the migration across a network connection, prohibitive in terms of price, prohibitive in terms of performance, whatnot. So you can just use a migration appliance, move the data physically, and then upload it into the cloud platform. And then you could do automatic application deployments. If the customer already has a CI/CD pipelines, we can just leverage that. And then another thing too is sometimes you don't really migrate per se. You can just say, hey, we're going to modernize this application. Public cloud is going to be the target. We're going to deprecate the app that currently exists in either the Colo or private cloud and just have it be born anew in a cloud native fashion in the public cloud. So yeah, that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Atari. What an excellent presentation. Some real illumination there. And we certainly do have questions. In the meantime, what I am going to do while we are taking some questions is put up our last poll question of the day about information that our attendees may want from Rackspace and VMware. So vote now, get your votes in while we're going over some Q&A here. So first question is from Paul. He wants to know, if you're an SMB, meaning small, medium business, which cloud option is the best suited for that scale of business? Or is data access and are data access and security needs the greatest determinant for which option to take? Kind of an involved question there.
Yeah, it is. The first thing, based on what we've seen, it's, I would say, public cloud. Again, it doesn't even matter about the business, but it depends on the volume of the workloads that they have or the type of workloads that they have. But one thing we've noticed is SMB is very price sensitive. So typically for the workloads that SMB normally have, public cloud seems to be a better option because they can get cost efficiencies there without having to invest in physical infrastructure, either in Colo or private cloud. So that's typically what we'll see. But again, things things can be different. But generally, that's
for sure. Okay, excellent. Tom wants to know. He asks, can I cross connect to all three public clouds, my Colo and my own data center? And if the answer is yes, can you expect the same kind of speeds across those three networks, or are there going to be differences?
Yes, you can do it. The question is, why would you want to, right? There has to be a real rationale for that. In terms of network speed, yes. I mean, it could be the same, because when you're connecting, typically you have like a network appliance as a target in each of these clouds. You could use a dedicated line, or you could use a virtual connection via public cloud. It just depends on your requirements. So in terms of speed, and it can be consistent. There's no difference because each of the hyperscalers provide specific performance requirements, but you wouldn't want to. We haven't really seen those types of setup,
right?
And if you do have something like that, you definitely want to question why.
Yeah. And if Tom does that, I hope he lets us know what he sees, because that would be interesting to find out. Okay, I think we have time for one or two more. Vinay wants to know, when transitioning from a private to a public cloud, how do you ensure that all of your data is removed from the public provider? So I'm not sure exactly how to read that.
Yeah, I'm not clear on that question, because you're moving from private to public cloud, and
Yeah.
Your data is going to be gone from the private cloud, right? So
Right. I would think that almost might be reversed. If you're going from public back to private, that might be what you'd be more concerned about. I'm not sure.
yeah,
So,
I mean, from public to private, I mean, there's no way to guarantee. You just have to take the word
Right.
from the public cloud provider. But some public cloud providers allow you encrypt your data even at the block level. So even if you move it over and it somehow exists, nobody can really access it because it's encrypted at that level. So I mean, there's that would be one way to ensure that nothing gets tampered with. But I
Right.
think a lot of these hyperscalers have guarantees that.
Sure. Okay. I think we've got time for one more question, and this has to do with kind of maybe a myth, maybe not. A lot of people think that private clouds are more secure and compliant than public clouds. Is that a myth, or is that a truth? What is your take on that?
I would say back then, I would say yes, a couple of years ago. But I think from a security perspective, the private cloud and public clouds are pretty much equivalent. A lot of the hyperscalers invest a lot of money in ensuring that they're compliant across different industries, across different compliance regulations. So I'll say yes. The only one difference I would say from a security and compliance perspective that I wouldn't say if it makes private cloud more compliant, but it's the data sovereignty. Mm-hmm. So that's one advantage that, from a compliance perspective, that private cloud has over public cloud. But
sure.
Yeah.
Right. In some situations, you literally cannot expose it,
exactly.
right, to public networks. Exactly. Yep. For sure. Okay. All right. So that's all the time we've got questions. We've got a lot more coming in that I'm sure Rackspace and VMware are going to follow up on. One last thing I wanted to ask you, Atari, is for customers who want to take the next step, what should they do right after this event ends, who want to know more about Rackspace?
Yeah, they can reach out to there's contacts on our Rackspace website. They can reach out via there, put in their request, and we'll have like a sales record follow up with them and kind of understand their needs. So I would say start from that first. There's contact information in the Rackspace.
Sounds great. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again for your time. Thanks. I'm glad your mic was working the whole time. That was really good to see.
I was nervous there for a second.
No, I think the gremlins all left before you got on today. So lucky for you, right? Once again, Atari, thanks so much for a great presentation. Really enjoyed it.
No problem. Thank you.
Very good. All right, and that is a wrap for the presentations today, but we are not quite all the way done yet. We still have to do our last prize drawing giveaway. And we have a winner now for the final $300 Amazon gift card of the event, and that is Martin Brija from New Jersey. I hope I said the last name right. Martin Brija, congratulations to you, Martin. We will be in touch about getting you your gift card as well. So this event today was a lot of fun for me to do. I really enjoyed it, even with some of the issues we had. And if you would like to sponsor an event, hopefully without as many gremlins, we'd love to talk to you. We got a lot of events. We can cover any kind of topic. We can do specialized events. If you'd like us to do one for you, just get in touch. Connect at actualtechmedia.com, and we will be with you to help you work something out for sure. And don't wait on that. As we mentioned before, we have the poll on what kind of events people want to see next year. So let's talk some more about that. And finally, there's an upcoming event I think that you might be really interested in just a couple of days. It is on ransomware best practices, which is something I think we all are interested in. And that is going to be happening Thursday, 2 days from now, Thursday, August 17th, noon Eastern time, which is, of course, 9 a.m. Pacific time. If you're interested in this, sign up now and reserve your spot for that megacast. That is really going to have some great information. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, we're out of here, folks. I want to thank all of our presenters for putting together great presentations, Q&A insights, and for just making this just a fun event. I want to thank our participants today: Rubrik, TierPoint, Dell, Rackspace, VMware. Finally, last but certainly not least, I want to thank all of you who attended and for putting up with all of our little tech issues we have. I really do appreciate your persistence here and hope you learned a lot. It was great to be on with you. And that is a conclusion for today's event. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.